In Our Voices is made possible in part by the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center, taking a stand for humanity by remembering the past and committing to the future.
I was born in a small town in Poland called Sokołów Podlaski. My memory is fairly faint, but I remember certain things. The marketplace. On Thursdays, the farmers would come to the marketplace with all their wares, and the local population, the tradespeople, would display their wares, and trade would go on, and the horses, and the wagons, and to me, this was like Disney World. Never heard of that before, but that's the way it felt to me. And I thought that that's the way life was going to be. But then life began to change. Germany invaded Poland. German soldiers came into our town. First thing I remember they did is they pulled the chief rabbi out of his quarters, chased him up to the town's marketplace, because that's where the gathering point was. And they sheared his beard off while their comrades were taking pictures of this humiliated Jew, and they killed him. Very simple. We were not citizens. We had no rights. So German army had the ability to do whatever they wanted with us. And on a daily basis, life changed. Our possessions were taken away. Couldn't even keep a bicycle. If you had a radio, you were killed. And then, in their wisdom, in order to protect us from the local population, which was another lie, they created a ghetto. They blocked off an area where 1,000 people lived, built 12-foot walls with barbed wire on top and barbed wire fences along. And the people that lived outside the ghetto or in the farming areas, the Gestapo would come to their house, say, you got 15 minutes to gather your belongings and move into the ghetto. Now that was an area where 1,000 people lived. Suddenly you had over 5,000 people in that area. The designation was that each room that existed had to contain 7 human beings. We were placed on a horrifying diet. Our consumption was supposed to be something like 480 grams of food, and you can't live on that. So if your parents were fortunate enough to have some money or connections, they would sneak out of the ghetto and buy some food and bring it home to sustain the family. And then the German soldiers would come into our town, or the Gestapo, the SS, and they'd demand 400 or 300 people to go to work. Another euphemism or another lie, because these people were sent to a place called Treblinka, which was only about 70 miles away from our town. And as a point of information, you should know that Treblinka existed for only less than 2 years. And during that 2-year period of time, over 670,000 men, women, and children were slaughtered there, burned in ovens, and their ashes spread into fields. So the population began to diminish in the ghetto. I remember as a kid, I must have been 8 years of age at that time, maybe even 9, walking the streets of the ghetto, seeing dead people lined up on sidewalks against the walls of houses. And that didn't affect me for some reason. But then, seeing little children in the same conditions with their eyes popped out on sidewalks, dead and dying, and that stuck in me. Stuck in my craw, it still is. Because I anticipated that this was going to be my lot in life. How soon? Nobody knew. So life in the ghetto was dramatic, it was traumatic. And then the finality to us came in September, the end of September 1942, on a high holiday, Yom Kippur, or Day of Atonement. The ghetto was surrounded by Gestapo, Ukrainian soldiers, and local police. And the final killing started. I remember my mother waking me up, told me to get dressed in a hurry, because we had a hiding place on the second floor of our building, and pushing me up the stairs as men, women with their children in their arms, running up the stairs to get into that hiding place. And I'm scared. I'm scared as to what was going to happen to us. I was always afraid of the pain that came with dying. And finally, when we all got into that hiding place, it was a secret room. A cover was placed upon the opening. And I remember going to the window that was painted green, but there were scratches in there, so you could see what was going on the outside. And the Gestapo and the soldiers running around looking for Jews. Anyone that was found was either beaten, shot to death. And I wish I had the words to describe to you the fear that I felt as a kid. There are no words to describe it. Shaking, scared. Didn't want to die, wanted to live so desperately. Praying to God to let me live. But then also, why would God let me live? What's so special or what's so different about me? And in this hiding place, as we're sitting there, my dad, my mother, and my little sister Sarah, my baby sister Sarah, has been breaking my heart for all my life. In the same room, there's a woman breastfeeding her child. And suddenly the child begins to cry. And everybody around her keeps telling her to shut that child up so we're not discovered. But the noise continues. I watch in disbelief as the mother places a hand on the child's face and begins to exert pressure. And the child's legs begin to kick and flail. And then suddenly they move no more. Tears appear. Questioning myself, or questioning, would my mother do this to me under those circumstances? And it's hard to believe under normal circumstances the mother had a capability of killing her own child. But I ask you to remember the conditions. When people are being killed, they'll do all kinds of things. They'll do almost everything and anything to try to survive for another hour or another day. That, my dear friends, was reality. And then suddenly there are noise and footsteps on top of a hiding place, and the opening to a hiding place is ripped away. Shots are being fired into a hiding place. And suddenly there are dead people laying all over the floor with blood all over. And I realized the blood is in my mouth, from my lip, from a bullet that hit the wall, and a splinter is embedded in my upper lip. and the screams of "Rouse, Rouse, out!" And my father has little Sarah in his arms. My mother was pulled out of line, not knowing what was going to happen to her, and I'm behind him. His bag shields me from the blows of the Ukrainian guards. And we're chased out from our hiding place into the street and lined up against the wall. And ultimately, we're chased up the hill. Some people are chased up to our potato field that existed behind our house. They're shot and they're dumped into a big hole. While others, including my dad and I and little Sarah, are chased up to the marketplace of the town. And we're made to sit in rows on the cobblestones, one line of people behind the other, and guards walking around us, beating people if they're not lined up right. And my will to live was so great. I was crying and I asked my dad, "What should I do? What should I do?" And he said, "Run." Remember the words that he used. Yiddish. Life, Allah, life. And he told me to run to a place where my sister was being hidden. You see, before the liquidation, my parents had made arrangements with a Polish couple by the name of Górski to take in one of the children. My parents, everybody knew what was going to happen to us, so they wanted to save at least one child. And my sister Irene was snuck out of the ghetto and placed with the Górskis for safety. And I didn't know where she was. But then I'm saying to myself, I was 10 years old. How am I going to escape? They'll see me and they'll shoot me. But in my own mind, I felt that if I run and they shoot me in the back, perhaps I won't feel anything, it'll be done. And yet, still hoping that I would survive. Don't know where that will came from. But I had the most tremendous will to want to live, audacity to want to survive and live so badly. So I crawled behind the people sitting in those long lines. And on my hands and my knees, I started crawling to the back or at the end of the marketplace, hoping that they won't see me or shoot me, and slowly slither into the sewer that ran along the street. We had open sewers at that time. And I kept crawling in the mud in the sewer till I felt I was out of line. And then I stood up and started running. I'm roaming the fields looking for a barn to hide in, especially at night because it's getting cold. And in my inability to understand any better, there was a work camp, a concentration camp called Kurchev. There was about 1,000 Jewish people that had let live to work till they didn't need them anymore. And when I got there, they told me that my mother was still alive. She was pulled out of line and put on a work detail, about 50 of them, men and women. Their job was to clean up the ghetto, pack any belongings that the Germans wanted, and the rest was just left open to the general population. I made my way back to the town. How I did these things is beyond my understanding. And I found my mother, and she would hide me in one of the buildings in the small marketplace. And at night she would come and bring me some food. And this went on probably into mid to late November. And just before the Gestapo pulled up to their workstation to kill them because they didn't need them anymore, she and another man escaped. They came to get me again into the fields, into the forest. And our existence was very difficult because my mother used to go and beg farmers for a place to hide or some food. Most turned us away. Some threatened to turn us over to the Germans. And this went on probably into December, and it gets extremely cold, and I'm getting sick. Still have my short pants on. And I remember one night, as it were yesterday, I'm standing against the wall of the farmhouse next to this man, by the way, I didn't like because I was concerned that he was taking my father's place in my mother's life. And my mother's negotiating with a farmer across the yard by the barn for a place to hide. And then suddenly she disappears with him. And after a while she reappears, approaches me, and tells me that I must go back to the town to see if I can have the Gorskys let me in. She hands me a ring that she has and a pair of earrings, and told me to give this to the Gorskys or anyone else that would be willing to hide me or help me. And I'm totally devastated. My heart is broken. How can my mother do this to me? And then you know what happens? Hate. Pure, unadulterated hate takes over. You hate everything and everybody around you. And then somehow you say to yourself, okay, I'll show them I'll survive. And somehow I made my way back to the town. I walked into the ghetto, which was dark and silent. There was no Jews left anymore. Went into one of the houses, laid down on the floor, and went to sleep. And early in the morning, I woke and started walking to the Gorskys, hoping no one would see me or recognize me. And when I got to the Gorskys, I knocked on the door. Mrs. Gursky opens up the door, and she sees me, and she starts screaming at me for coming there. I says, my mother told me you would help me. You're my last chance to try and stay alive. You have my sister here. And I tell you, I cried and I cried and I begged so desperately. She finally said, okay, I'll let you up to the attic, but only for a few days. And then you must leave and find your mother again, because you are not my responsibility. I handed her the jewelry that I had. She hands me a bucket to use as a toilet, and stuck a bunch of straw into a sack, and we crawled up to the attic. The attic had a dirt floor, and the roof was made out of tin plates, which was slanted like that. And she puts the sack of straw where the roof and the floor meet. And that, my friends, becomes my safe haven. So when I first got here, Mrs. Gursky took me up to the attic. It's not going to be easy. She put some straw in a sack and placed it right here